We now move to the third and final, last but not least, session. And I'm very pleased to welcome, well, a fantastic professional and a good friend, Maruxa Cardama. She's the Secretary General of the SLOCAT Partnership, Sustainable Low Carbon Transport Partnership, of which IRF is honored and proud to be part of since its very inception, I believe. And I'll pass you the floor, Maruxa. Exciting presentations ahead as well.
Thank you so very much, Susanna, and thanks to IRF for the opportunity of being here with you today. Exciting conversations and extraordinarily timely. And I do think that, well, the topic of innovation has been coming up in the previous sessions, isn't it? I think that IRF President Halki has framed the goals and the objectives of innovation already in a very meaningful manner. He talked about durability and overall resilience of the infrastructure. He talked about new business models and reduction of natural resources use towards the circular economy. He talked about catering for new mobility needs as well as for active modes, including walking and cycling. This, connected to some of the questions that I've seen coming up in the chat, sort of evokes to me the need for framing road sector innovation across the entire avoid, shift and improve framework, isn't it? Which is still fundamental towards sustainable mobility. And all these in a moment in which we know very well that pandemic recovery packages must embrace and enable the power of sustainable low carbon mobility for green and equitable recovery. EIV Vice President Pavlova, she also referred to a technology revolution and sustainable low transport solutions that should enable more than one technology pathway. I think that, connected to several interventions by many of the panelists, this reminds us of the imperative to make sure that we scale up innovation and technology solutions for road transformation that are cost efficient and context specific for all the different geographies across the very different political and economic realities of different countries. So today we are spoiled to count with us a panel of remarkable specialists. They're going to try to give us some insights of what do we consider to be key elements for the innovation in the sector. These are just snippets. These are really just food for thought due to time constraints. But the IRF is actually going to help us dig deeper into some of these topics with a series of upcoming webinars. So with no further ado, let me introduce you to the panel. May I ask them all to turn their cameras on for a moment so everybody can, see you there, and then we will turn cameras off and you will only turn it on, please, when each of you are speaking. So this wonderful panel consists of, as a keynote, Karla Gonzalez Carvajal, who is Practice Manager Europe in the World Bank, Michael Kilgariff, who is the CEO of RoadsAustralia, Nicolas Miravalls, who is the Global Head for Road Infrastructure in LafargeHolcim, Michael Caltabiano, who is the CEO of Australian Road Research Board, Shreya Gadepalli, who is the South Asia Director in the Institute for Transportation and Development, ITDP, and last but not least, Janice Nasoulis, who's the Director for Toll and Highway Operations in the IBI Group. So this is a phenomenal, remarkable bunch of specialists who are going to help us tease out some of these innovation topics. But with no further ado, Karla, may I give you the floor, ask you to turn your camera on for some framing thoughts, some framing remarks for us to kick it off. The floor is yours, Karla, please.
Thank you, everyone. I hope that you are hearing me now. Are you? Thank you. So I will need the organizers to pass the slides, please. And let me start right now. So good day, everyone. I have 8 minutes to share key points about innovation in the sector. And let me start by saying that we all have the responsibility to accelerate this transition from being an essential brand giant to become a green dynamo. As we can see in this slide, next slide please, the road sector has long enjoyed a privileged position. Regardless of the region, around the world, it receives the lion's share of transport investments, and its responsibilities should equal its footprint. So the world needs investments to continue on roads. However, financial resources will be constrained more than ever. And we have to say that the sector cannot count upon government cash injections as it used to do. Why? Well, The MOFs have a huge list of priorities now after sustaining one of the biggest fiscal hits of a generation. What has happened is unparalleled even by the global financial crisis. So roads need to justify their place on that list of priorities now. And so the questions could be, do we have the right decision-making tools in place? Do governments have the right regulations in place to allow the road sector to deliver true value for money while meeting green and social commitments? Do we have the critical frameworks to take decisions under the so-called new normal? These questions matter the most because we're talking about innovative approaches to be able to transform this essential brown giant into a green dynamo. And so there are two things that we have to take into account as a no-brainer: multimodality and resilience. As an example, during the pandemic, we faced an acute shortage of truck drivers. It takes fewer people to move the equivalent amount of freight by rail. Better intermodal integration with trains will help to boost the overall system during crises. Ensuring coordination between these two transport modes is very much needed. Another example, digitalization of corridors. This will help the broader transport system to adjust to challenges. Tracking technologies will be key to facilitate the kind of time-sensitive cargo operations that will be needed to distribute COVID-19 vaccines, hopefully very soon with the key support from the road sector. Integration with the broader public transportation system will enhance what micromobility is able to deliver to users. So multimodality, resilience are key to turning roads into a green dynamo. Another example from Europe, the so-called green lanes. What happened at the border posts during the pandemic? As we can see in this slide, in the weeks after COVID, trucks were waiting more than 20% longer than they were before the crisis. Once the sector began to use technology through Green Labs app, waiting times went down to only 4% more than pre-crisis levels. So both truck drivers and border post staff were given a real-time information on the status of one another's operation, allowed them to make adjustments to avoid bottlenecks and delays. So we will need to identify technology solutions that will allow us to react more efficiently as we face ballooning environmental challenges, fiscal constraints, and the adjustments in demand for the new mobility. Technologies like weighing motion and tracking systems have a role to play in minimizing waste, time and costs, and encouraging the proper use of infrastructure. Next slide, please. I believe I am already in the slide number 5. Sorry that I have not said, let me just check whether we are in the right slide now. Yes, please move to the next one. Thank you. So 3 big agendas out of the road sector will be critical under the Green Dynamo approach: decarbonization, congestion, and safety. Decarbonization within the transport sector is going very slow. This will be one of the sectors that last to wean itself off fossil fuels. COVID may only worsen this. China saw an increase in road-based freight during COVID. The EU Green Deal that Matthew has already talked about has a target to reducing transport emissions by 90% by 2050. However, this seems farther off than ever. Efficiency gains will be the road sector's near-term answer to these challenges. Efforts will have to be pragmatic and taking advantage of transport patterns, changes that we use under this new normal. For example, home-based work is already impacting the travel peaks with opportunities to redefine the issues around congestion and subsequently the road asset management plans. And safety, implementation of Vision Zero, safe system approach, and all the very important things that we have heard just before, we must ensure that we understand the responsibility of the road sector to make this happen. Building back initiatives need to treat pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers as equals. This means adjusting road design standards and recognizing the responsibility carried by our sector. Next slide. And let me finish with two slides. One, the power of diversity. We cannot talk about innovation in the sector unless we pay attention to diversity. When we are designing a world that is meant for everyone, we need diversity at the table. The sector urges women and men representation. Here in Europe, only 23% of the transport sector is female. This is a male-dominant sector all over the world. However, these are no times for unilateral thinking. Traditional responses may not be enough to do the leapfrog. Diverse, interdisciplinary teams will be key to achieve rejuvenation of rural areas, redefining the rural-urban connectivity in these times, and digitalization corridors towards making bigger steps for decarbonization of the roads. Build Back Better may require cultural change that stretches upstream of road sector jobs at all levels. It's time for the social angle of the road sector to become as important as the brick and mortar one. It's time to pay attention to beneficiaries as absolutely key players as we keep designing this or transforming this essential bronze giant into a green dynamo. However, the gap is big, so it's our responsibility with an entire generation. And my last slide wants to go further into this topic of the importance of a change in the mindset of our sector. Look at the bar at the far end. This is from UK. After COVID-19, non-motorized transport have seen spike, and we hope that it will last. But this graphic suggests that it's more than ever important to bring in all the beneficiaries of the roads to the science and decisions. This graphic also underlines what we have heard from Emma McLennan on humans at the heart of design. These are times to use the infrastructure assets more wisely, flatten the demand side of the curve while managing traffic, and look seriously into the green dynamo opportunity that we'll have. We need to make investment decisions among competing priorities more wisely. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so very much, Carla. This was really remarkable. I'm trying to put my video on just to let the organizers know, but apparently I probably need more sleep as well. Perfect. Excellent. Now I'm back on camera. That was truly remarkable. Thank you so very much. I mean, what a goal, isn't it? Turning the brown giant into a green dynamo. And how did you reminded us that decarbonization, congestion, safety are still those challenges we really need to look into, wondering whether we have the right tools. Thanks for that particular attention to freight that is not always, related to as much as a passenger transportation in some other spaces. So thank you very much for that. And thanks, of course, for that urgent call to diversity, to changing mindsets and to stopping unilateral thinking. That was fabulous. Thank you so very much. So with this incredible wealth of framing thoughts, I would now like to pass on the floor to Michael Kilgariff, CEO of RoadsAustralia. Michael, I understand that you're going to take us a bit through the importance of procurement, isn't it? But I don't want to put words in your mouth. The floor goes to you, Michael, please.
Okay, well, best I actually turn my video and sound on. We've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings over the last 8 months, as well as anybody, and I think the saying of 2020 is that you are on mute. So thank you, Maruxa. I appreciate the introduction. I think, Susanna, you're operating the slides, so perhaps we can move to the next one, please. So thank you. So look, what I'm going to do today is just to talk to you a little bit about some of the procurement reform, work that Roads Australia has been undertaking over the last couple of years, and which has really become a lot more critical over the course of COVID-19 and some of the issues that have emerged over that time. Now, Roads Australia, as you can see there, does have 5 policy priorities, but the one that I'm going to focus on today, of course, as I said, is capacity and procurement reform. If we can move to the next slide, please, Susanna. So Australia, over the last 5-6+ years, has really been experiencing one of the greatest infrastructure booms in generations. And you can see that particular graphic there that shows that over the next 5 years or so, the level of infrastructure spending is going to be increasing quite significantly. And while there is actually a fall off in that graph, that only reflects the fact that governments don't usually plan more than 4 to 5 years in advance. And in fact, that peak that you see there will be some peaks and troughs, but we expect that that peak will continue for quite some time. So the federal government, pre-COVID, had a $100 billion investment over 10 years. All of our state governments are also investing billions of dollars in transport infrastructure, be it roads, bridges, tunnelling, grade separation. It's quite significant, the amount of expenditure that's being undertaken. But of course, what's happened over the COVID period is that because transport infrastructure has been identified as what we call an economic stimulus industry, a lot of that infrastructure spending that we see there has been brought forward. Plus there is now additional funding that is being put into this industry. So what that means is that it's more important than ever for industry and governments to work together to ensure that projects are delivered in such a way that maximises benefits to the community and enables industry to get the best use of its capital and people. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So as I said at the beginning, throughout 2020 and 2019, procurement reform has been a significant policy focus for Roads Australia. When we undertook some surveys, as I know the IRF did at the beginning and during COVID, it was quite clear that initially the big concern of industry was to ensure that the industry was able to keep moving or keep working while many other industries were had a lockdown imposed on them. And in Australia, luckily that was very much the case, and it was proven to be very safe. And very few transmissions actually happened on our transport infrastructure work sites. But in later surveys, it was quite clear that clarity of pipeline and procurement reform really escalated up to the top 1 or 2 issues that the industry actually had. So, as I said before, governments are now looking at the transport infrastructure industry as being the industry that will stimulate economic growth in Australia. And so there's really some considerable amount of money that's actually being put into this industry. And as I said before in the previous slide, really what this means is that industry and government needs to work together to address the procurement reform to make sure that that infrastructure spending benefits both the community and is able to be delivered by industry in an efficient manner. So next slide, please. So in recent times, Roads Australia has produced this procurement reform report, which is available on our website and easily downloadable by anybody who wishes to do so. And the participants that helped us do this report are engineering and design consulting firms, project managers, legal and commercial advisors, government agencies, construction and related services companies. So really this report has been put together by a very, very broad coalition of interests in this industry. Next slide, please. So the clear number of issues have been identified in Australia. The process for risk definition and allocation, particularly on large projects, requires a major rethink. In Australia, we're now in the era of what we call mega projects, where These projects are $2, $3, $4 billion plus, and that's becoming a lot more common. As I said, the size and complexity of the projects has increased, and as a result, a lot of these small to medium contractors, those what we call tier 2 and tier 3 contractors, are finding it a lot harder to effectively participate in the industry. And of course, a lot of those tier 2 and tier 3 contractors tend to be what we call local companies. So that obviously has significant issues, both politically and economically. The third one is that governments have not yet laid out a long-term pipeline of work so that companies can actually have some predictability and clarity around the sort of work that is going to be coming at them over the next few years, and in turn invest and gear up to be able to undertake that work. The next one is that time available during procurement is often not long enough to allow for a sufficient risk assessment, and perhaps one of the more apparent issues that has arisen in Australia, which I'm sure is universal, is that there's little allowance made for the risk of utilities, discovering utilities during construction, and often that leads to significant blowouts, and in Australia has actually led to quite some severe political issues for governments. So the time available during procurement is often not long enough to allow for sufficient risk assessment, and of course that includes the utilities that I just talked about before, but it also includes geotech and other issues that come along. The time available during the design phase for most big projects is often not adequate for design firms to innovate or explore better engineering solutions. So engineering firms often feel that they're not allowed to use their innovative engineering expertise to deliver what they would consider to be the best outcome, and really are relying on, I guess, practices that have been part of the industry for some time. And of course, current procurement models which apply what we call a hard-edge risk transfer, where the clients, governments, transferring risks, often unknown risks, onto contractors, which inevitably do lead to significant and complex legal disputes, and ultimately, of course, leads to a lose-lose situation for industry, governments and the community. So governments are not engaging with industry early enough in the design stage to allow there to be sufficient, I guess, for industry to be able to take into account a lot of those issues that I was talking about. We also have significant issues around the fact that our education system is not really actually coping with the increased demand. And as Karla mentioned before, we don't do enough to encourage women and people from diverse backgrounds into the industry. So next slide, please, Susanna. So what I'd like to do is just briefly cover some of the recommendations and the issues that were covered in those before I wrap this up. So in the first one,
Michael, but if we could do it in 1 minute, that would be wonderful.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll move very, very quickly then.
Fast.
So
We've been 10 minutes, so please, if you could, that would be phenomenal. Thanks a lot.
That'd be good. So there's a number of recommendations that we've made around ownership, pipeline visibility, planning and design, legal issues, capacity, governance, and culture and inclusion. That, look, I think I covered off those in the last one, in my last slide. So ultimately, what we're looking for here is a collaborative partnership between industry and government to pursue the recommendations set out in this report. It's not all about governments taking responsibility for this industry. It's really also about industry stepping up and taking responsibility for a number of things that they can actually deal with themselves. And of course, that issue of diversity is certainly one of them. And the culture around the industry, mental health, all of those sorts of things, I think industry can really step up. So thank you, Maruxa.
Thank you so very much, and apologies again for having to, to be the bad cop in the movie. It's never an easy win.
That's all right.
Very much appreciated. My video is still controlled by our organizers, just to give them a heads up. What a wonderful list of the issues that you faced. I think it's quite an experience, isn't it, that you've extracted from that boom in infrastructure over decades that you've were talking about. And certainly, I'm sure that this resonates well beyond Australia. Clever partnerships between public and private sector, where each of the sides fulfills their roles, but they engage into collaboration. Phenomenal. Thank you so very much, Michael. So let's go now to Nicolas Miravalls from LafargeHolcim, who I believe is going to take us through a bit of a journey on digitalization. What are the challenges and the opportunities there? Over to you, please, Nicolas.
Thank you very much. Sorry, thank you very much, Maruxa. Good everyone. Good afternoon to everyone. So I tell you about road and construction material today. So this is a love story, really. We say about love story when it's together forever. So we talk about lifetime. Usually now it will be more a life cycle for that one. First, I will qualify this relation. So roads are really material intensive, you know, with those figures. For 1 kilometer of road, 40,000 tons of material, 1.3 thousand tons of carbon equivalent. It's 25 to 40% of the direct cost of a road. And the quality of the materials will have impact also on the CO2 emission with parameters like pavement albedo, pavement carbonation, lightning, deflection, texture. All that will have impact on the road, on the cars, on the fuel consumption, on the emission of the infrastructure itself. Here we see visually very clearly roads are materials on materials, so it's really impacting a lot. 60% of those material will have, those material will have impact on 60% of the construction cost and 85% on the carbon emission. Here we talk about the physical infrastructure itself. And the fragmentation, as Michael said just before, of the value chain from the decision to the construction is such that we can lose some parameters in the journey. And this is leading to what we call a knowledge gap on materials. And those materials so much important for defining the asset finally will maybe not be considered at the right time. And this knowledge gap is really leading to non-optimized roads in cost, in carbon, and in lifetime as well. So designing the right pavement is a challenge. Defining this pavement is really complex. And optimizing it, it's even more complex because optimizing it would need to focus on a few dimensions. So which one will you pick? Is it optimizing about the cost? Is it about the environmental impact? Is it about the social impact? Is it about the maintenance or the future scenario for maintenance? So it's a vast question. And here comes the second challenge, because BIM and digitization is raising in roads and infrastructure. And the second challenge is the digital twin. Here you see a picture where this digital twin is about one, the virtual, and the other, the physical, enriching each other from data, and it's a loop. And this loop, you have to get it right to have the digital and the virtual and the physical centered together. So leading to better understanding the reality, having a better control of your project, anticipate the constraints, and integrate the challenges. And this loop should remain as a permanent information flow. So it's not a simple transformation. It's really a revolution in the way we will build roads, and we will consider those roads with data analysis, project control, impact measurements, interoperability between players, failures, mitigations as well. And we said it many times today about informed decisions to be made. And the safety will be also considered here, of course, because quality of roads and safety, we discussed that many times already, are very linked, and the materials play a major role here. So ORIS is a sourcing intelligence for road optimization. LafargeHolcim is proud to present this innovation. It's a digital tool to favor road optimization. It's made of 3 blocks. It's a material intelligence platform, so geolocalized database for materials, a set of algorithm and research and knowledge intelligence put at the disposal of the users, and it's an industry secure platform, so everyone can connect and get out of this material intelligence the best impact for the project. So it's covering for the moment 4 dimensions: budget, environment, durability, and resources. And we see already huge benefits of this platform, considering the things upfront. I will name 2 or 3 of them. On the budget, of course, we can do better choices focused on local sourcing, obviously. On the carbon, the physical infrastructure, depending on the structure that we will choose, can vary from up to 50%. So we can reduce the carbon impact of the physical infrastructure up to 50%. And natural resources, of course, can be also drastically improved depending on the structure we choose. How does it work? So it's a platform ecosystem, and it works, as platform with multi-users and multi-stakeholders, having the ability to tap into this data platform, from public authorities to engineering firms, material suppliers, contractors. I mean, there are different levels of engagement and different capacity for each of them. Michael earlier said that we need a better collaboration between the industry and the procurement system and the decision system. I think it fits in very, very well here. So a few examples, a few pictures to illustrate what it gives technically. So you see here we are comparing 5 different designs, pavement structures, and we compare them in terms of environment, service life, budget, and natural resources. And you can deep dive in it. I will not go in detail, just to show you that this is really detailed and this is really user-friendly. And you can have more information about which one will perform better in natural resources, consumption, or carbon impact, or the cost of your project, of course. And when you choose one, you can really have the entire scenario for this related to materials and have, it has been said many times also, have informed decision on what we do. And you have another screen here just to show the priorities, design number 2, design number 3, how do they perform in environment, service life, budget, and again, this natural resources dimension. So you have really different angles. It's not easy because it's a multi-parameter approach, and one project will be different from another. So in terms of results, but in terms of impact and parameters as well. Finally, I will conclude with this one. There is an interactive map, of course, but this is also leading to the project traceability and the digital twin, because digital twin is not only before, it can also, and it is also after the construction. And this digital twin will also support and help in performing better the efficiency of the asset in the future, the safety management of this asset, and predictive maintenance, for example. So we need digital twin before, we need digital twin after. At the end, it's the same digital twin, but different usage for different goals. So we are very proud to contribute to this. And as it was said also today, it's a collective effort, and it has to be balanced because there are many, many parameters. And ORIS will take a role, hopefully, in this transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Nicolas. It was super interesting, showing us that notion of innovation with a purpose, isn't it? And how the whole life cycle can actually be covered with this tool. Thank you so very much. So it's now the opportunity to listen to Michael Caltabiano from Australian Road Research Board. Michael, standards, isn't it? We need standards in all these things to make sense and to take ourselves accountable and to set a level playing field. Can you tell us a bit more about it, please, in the context of Australia? Thank you.
I certainly can. And I think we can probably dispense with the slides, actually. And I'll just talk to our audience one-on-one. So we can take those slides off, Melina. So
Yes.
what?
Thanks a lot for that. Go without slides. Much appreciated.
Without slides. So the challenge we face, of course, is how do we accelerate this road sector transformation that's actually happening right before our eyes? And COVID has given us a 12-month reprieve to reimagine, to rethink, and to re-engage with a different outcome for an integrated mobility future. So we're going to achieve some step changes in safety, sustainability and resilience, integrated mobility, accessibility for all in a low carbon future. We are going to take these step changes. So to support those, innovation is the key. Innovation in standards, innovation in specifications, innovation in material types. The development of new knowledge is the next horizon to deliver those step change outcomes to accelerate road sector transformation. So I was just going to focus on a couple of things. Firstly, innovation in the use of materials. At the Australian Road Research Board, we are heavily engaged in the development of new standards for reclaimed asphalt, crushed glass in asphalts, construction demolition waste in embankments and granular fill materials, chrome rubbers, waste stream plastics. We will have the first national specification on waste stream plastics next year. So from the dump site through a secondary processor into a blended bitumen product, into an asphalt down on the road, 100% recyclable, no microplastic contamination, fully recyclable at the end of its life. We must innovate to enable a new future, and waste streams and the circular economy, which you've heard a little bit about and Nicolas touched on, are the part of the future, the development of these new products. The second part of the stream of making this step change is, as Michael Kilgariff said, procurement. But when you come one step down from the administrative part of procurement, you immediately come in contact with, well, how do we specify new materials? We don't have guidelines. We don't have specifications. They haven't been written. How do we actually articulate performance outcomes? And how do we, most importantly, reward innovation, not just talk about it, but actually enshrine it into the tender documentation? They're the things that we are working in partnership with the likes of RoadsAustralia, industry and government to make those changes to enshrine a sense of innovation in all aspects of the procurement step. The third one that I wanted to talk about is government capability. And one of the big missing links in this step change that is going to occur globally is the capacity for government to respond with skilled staff, globally experienced staff, staff that who are enabled to have a relationship with the private sector and really take the best that the private sector has to offer to produce a new outcome. That is a really rare breed of person in government, certainly in Australia today. And we need to support them on that journey so that they can make those conscious decisions, take those risks, knowledgeable risks to deliver a different outcome. We must not allow, particularly our government staff, to be introspective. We must not allow them to have a nationalistic view. We've got to continue a global collaboration through partnerships like IRF, share our knowledge across the globe to achieve these step changes. We don't want 165 nations developing the same outcomes 165 times. We want to share that knowledge across the globe. So they're the three things. There will be innovation in material science. There will be a really strong focus on circular economy, low carbon outcomes. There will be a change in procurement. There will necessarily have to be an enshrinement of innovation in that procurement cycle. And in all of it, we must support our government colleagues to enable them and give them the confidence to change, to make sure that the science and the rigor, the specifications, the guidelines are there to support them in their journey, to enable those tenders to actually quantify an innovative future. So that's it from me. I thought I would do something a little bit different and keep things moving for you, and look forward to seeing if there are any questions.
Made my life so easy. Thank you so very much, Michael. You've also retained the substance, the amount of substance we had in this very few minutes you spoke. Enshrining innovation, that culture of innovation, that was really phenomenal. And you brought up the issue of government capacity that we've heard in previous interventions, but I'm pretty sure that resonates heavily with your colleagues across the globe, not just in Australia. Wonderful. So now we move to India, and we go to India thanks to Shreya Gadepalli, South Asia Director in ITDP. Shreya, you're going to talk about people, isn't it? We've seen in the chat very much about how do we put people at the center. And this is very much what ITDP is doing in India, isn't it? People, putting people at the very center of sustainable mobility for equity and for climate action as well. So over to you, please, Shreya.
Thank you so much. So let me share my slides. Let's see if we can get that working. Can you see my screen?
We can indeed.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do today is to tell you two love stories. Wouldn't that be fun? Because, you know, who doesn't like a story? And even more so if it's a love story, right? Right, Maruxa?
Yes, indeed. I'm muted, you know, as Michael was saying.
Okay, let me start with the first love story. I would have told three, but let me start with the first story. This first story is about Chennai. And once upon a time, in Chennai's heart, was a traffic nightmare. What you can see here is what it was like. You know, there were cars parked everywhere. There was a choking traffic and more or less no space for walking. And so what happened next? Do you want to see?
Absolutely. Don't leave us hanging.
Chennai fell into a love affair with walking and created its own Times Square, right there, what you saw, in its heart. And not just that, it started creating streets everywhere with great walking and also now cycling facilities. So the new mantra of street design was less parking, more life. And that's what we are celebrating, Chennai's healthy streets. That's what Chennai has been doing over the last 5 years. And, you know, we've been working with Chennai for almost 10 years now. And the first 5 years really went into inspiring the city to make action. And in the last 5 years, it's made dramatic action. It's got transformed over 100 kilometers of streets like this with great walking facilities. It has recently even launched a mega streets program that over the next decade, it would transform 10 times as much, which is 1,000 kilometers of streets. And not just transforming streets, an essential component of this is also to transform or reform parking. And Chennai, as we speak, is reforming parking by starting to price parking across the city, especially in the densest areas, and then gradually expanding to the rest of the city. And now, inspired by the action of Chennai, the state government, the provincial government of Tamil Nadu is taking these ideas to in all the cities of the state, 10 cities of the state. So that is this love story of Chennai with walking. And this is what we, the ITDP India program, have been engaged in over the last decade, transforming Chennai, but not just Chennai. Had I had a chance, I would have also spoken about Pune's love story, but I'll do that right at the end with a few slides. But the second love story that I want to speak about is a love story that happened in the age of COVID. Now, who would have thought that the world would come to a halt? That's a picture of Mumbai Suburban Rail, which every day got 7 million people across, and now pretty much is shut because it's not operating. And public transportation has more or less ceased to be in much of India. And even though some cities have started the operations of public transport, the ridership is very low. But cycling started booming again in India, like everywhere else in the world. We did a survey back in the early days of COVID and found that cycling might rise by 50 to 65%. And we've been proven right by really what is happening on the ground. Cycle sales have gone through the roof, about 400%. But now we did not want to lose this opportunity. Like Winston Churchill said, don't let a crisis go to waste. And that's what we did. We tied up hands with the Indian government to start the India Cycles for Change Challenge to make every Indian city, transform every Indian street into a great place to walk into a great place to cycle, ride cycles on, but also about walking. I'll get to that in a minute. So what are we doing? Right now, as we speak, over 100 cities, Indian cities, which have a population of net total population of over 100 million people, are working towards creating cycling-friendly initiatives. And over 600 civil society organizations have also registered to support. So we've tied them up. We've created a marriage between civil society and city governments to make this transformation a reality. They're doing on-the-ground handlebar surveys, hit the road with their cycles to identify what the barriers to cycling are. They've conducted surveys. Over 60,000 people have responded to these surveys to tell cities what their problems are. They've started even celebrating stories of independence with cycling, telling, and we did this around the Independence Day of India. And hundreds of people from every city, even more, started posting what a cycle meant to them. And this has created a new revolution of sorts, if you will. And cities are also creating cycle training camps to train people who may not know how to cycle, especially elderly women, doing cycle repair clinics, free clinics, so that people can get their cycles out to use. They're crowdsourcing data. Like, this is an example of what Bangalore is doing. They're crowdsourcing data using technology, leveraging technology. And what we are doing is to help also facilitate a peer-to-peer learning between cities. So what Bangalore does, Delhi learns, or Ahmedabad learns. What Ahmedabad does, Chennai learns, or Kohima learns, or Bhopal learns. So creating this whole network of peer-to-peer. Every city has a diverse team of city officials, experts, and citizens. And finally, they're all testing these ideas on the ground. So for example, Bangalore is doing a 17-kilometer cycling corridor. So the goal is have a process where cities first test interventions to find out how they work, identify, learn from them, identify what the issues were, how it could improve, and finally scale these to across the whole city. Now, on the lines of the Cycles for Change, we've also tied up with the Government of India to start the Streets for People Challenge to create great places to walk and places where people can enjoy life on the street. So if Cycles for Change had 107 cities, Streets for People has 113 cities that have signed up to transform themselves. And we're working with them right now as we speak. And this is the kind of transformation that we're really envisaging as streets make. This is an example of what Pune has been doing. You see on the street, there's pretty much no space to walk, even though there's something called a footpath, but there are trees on top of it, there's parking. People who are on crutches are right in the middle of the street, and the cyclists are right in the middle of the street. But by working with the businesses, the city managed to get that space in front also to combine with the space that they had to create much nicer walking facilities, where people are enjoying life, coming together, where instead of there being parking, there are parks that are being created on the streets. And people, young and old, rich and poor, men and women, everyone, able and disabled, are coming onto streets to enjoy life, to fall in love with their city again. This is a story of better streets, better cities, and better lives in India. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Shreya. Indeed, never let a crisis go to waste, isn't it? And you've told us and showed us how we can actually harness that culture of pop-up tactical urbanism to carry it forward for permanent improvements. Thank you so very much. So we have, last but not least at all, Janice Nasulis, who's Director for Toll and Highway Operations in the IBI Group. Janice, you have the terrible task of being the last speaker of the day, but we're not going to rush you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me bring up my presentation. So I'm going to share my screen.
Okay. I know that
so
great hands will help me to do so. I cannot see it right now. I don't know if others can, but I cannot see the presentation displayed.
Give me a second. I think. That should work.
Can we help you in any way, Jenny?
Sorry, so I will.
Yanis, when you share the screen, you need to select, there you are. You need to select the right, exactly.
Yeah.
You need to select.
Now it should work.
Yeah. Now we got it. Let's go.
Oh, perfect. Okay, let's go. So I'm gonna combine in my speech a little bit of what was talked about before. That's the digital twin, but also the reclaiming of space that was presented in the previous presentation. So I think my presentation matches very much to what we have seen in the last two presentations, but it's a bit more futuristic. So let's see a few things about the future vehicle. It's gonna be connected, it's gonna be autonomous. This will of course come a bit later, and most probably electric in a way. What means connected? Connected means the vehicle will be informed, but it will also be an informant. So it will get information from the environment and the infrastructure, and it will also provide information back to the infrastructure. This flow of information is already there now, although it goes now to the driver through the vehicle or through a mobile device. And in the future, it will go directly to the vehicle when it becomes smart enough. On the side of the infrastructure will be again connected to the vehicles, so informed from the vehicles, but it will be also an informant that will provide information to the vehicles. And our vision is that this infrastructure in the cities will also become fluid or flexible. So capable to introduce changes and to adapt to changes within short time and at reasonable cost. And let's have a look at how typical city location looks today. So we see that the road and the vehicle claim quite a lot of public space. In many cities, what cities and people and organizations try to do is to claim back space from the vehicle and to convert this space in a way that other activities can take place. It may be transportation activity, so with bike lanes, but also it can be space for dining outside on a wider area where people can walk. One example for this last activity is what the city of Toronto did during the difficult times that we go through now. The city of Toronto ran a program and converted parking spaces at the curbside into spaces for dining in order to help the restaurants put tables outside during the summer period and the good weather period, and so be able to continue their business during the time that the restrictions for dining inside were in place in the city. And IBI designed for this project, and the city of Toronto thinks that about 100,000 working positions were saved by implementing this solution. So the curbside is the space that is claimed by a lot of users and the citizens of a city. There's a traditional use, which is like pick up and drop off of people and goods. There are bus stops, parking, and bike lanes. And now there are also new uses coming for the curbside. Car sharing, bike and roller sharing, and also charging stations for electric vehicles or other, bicycles or rollers.
Janice, bad cop speaking here. Sorry, 2 minutes, please.
Yes. So the curbside, there are confusing regulations now. You see here the signs in this picture. So by time of the day of the week, or the vehicle type and the purpose of the trip, you may access or not the curbside. And although it's changing rapidly, it's difficult to manage. And IBI has developed a solution for this. It's called the Curb IQ solution, which uses actually the combination of the digital twin of the curbside and software and an application to inform drivers and other users of the curbside of the current situation of every location. For example, if a bus stop is not used for 30 minutes, it can definitely be used for drop off and pick up. And this is today possible with technology. Of course, in a future world, this can be even enhanced. And for example, if autonomous vehicles are driving on a road and only autonomous vehicles, it could be even possible to have to convert a lane in a road into a dining space during night and restrict vehicles from driving into this area just by virtually defining protected zones in a road. With this, I will finish my presentation, and I thank you very much. And I hope we will be able to do all these changes before different kinds of transport appear that will change the way we think about roads even more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Janice. Really, truly appreciated. Never easy to be the last speaker after a long morning, but I have to say that incredible interest from participants. You still harnessed it. They are there in hundreds, actually, and we've been 3 hours here. So thanks a lot to all colleagues. Bear in mind that this was just to create appetite. There are upcoming webinars in which IRF is going to help us dig deeper into these innovation matters. Thank you very much. It's been an honor to be here. Susanna, back to you, please. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Maruxa. I am the bad cop here because I've been pressing the moderators and the speakers to try and keep time. But it gives you a sense of how much we have to discuss going forward. As you said, the webinars will be lining up fairly soon, so we will have a chance to discuss this into more details. We'll try to get back to those questions that we can after all this. But stay connected with IRF and make sure that we'll create opportunities to dig into those topics. I'd like to give the floor for 2 seconds to Bill, our president, Mr. Bill Alkes, to wrap it up. Bill.
Thank you, Susanna. While I thank each and every one of you, participants, speakers, moderators, and the IRF team, I would like to stress again, as I did at the beginning, that this conference is just the beginning of a journey. Together with our federation's members and partners, we have undertaken not only to reflect on the impacts that COVID-19 is having on our industry, but more importantly, to start co-creating a more sustainable and equitable future. So I would like to invite all of you to engage with the IRF to shape a better road and transport sector and a better future for all. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. And this is really the end just for today and for this event. As Bill just said, it's the beginning of a journey, and we look forward to continue that journey with all of you. Thank you so much to all the participants, the speakers, and the moderators. The presentations as well as the recording will be made available as soon as possible. So stay tuned. You will be notified directly from us when they are available. Thanks. This is the closing. Have a great continuation of the day, or a good night, because plenty of you are still watching us from Asia. Bye-bye. Thanks.